Bienvenidos, bienvenidos. Qué gusto contar con todos ustedes. Estamos inaugurando la Semana Internacional del Coaching. Todos los años en el mes de mayo tenemos la fortuna de tener una semana completa o un poco más de tiempo para celebrar con diferentes conferencias, con diferentes invitados. La mayoría de las veces en ICF Colombia teníamos invitados nacionales, invitados de Latinoamérica, y esta semana, este año, nos vamos a estrenar con unos invitados de otros países, invitados de idioma en inglés, pero hemos conseguido, gracias a la tecnología, que podamos comunicarnos el día de hoy. La doctora Melissa está muy contenta de ver cómo funciona el Microsoft Translator. ¿De qué se trata esto? ¿Cómo funciona? Bien, ustedes tienen en el chat un link, que ya se los vuelvo a copiar. Ok, ahí lo acaba de copiar Santiago. Para obtener la traducción en tiempo real, por favor ingresen a translatormicrosoft.com. El link está ahí en el chat. Cuando ingresen, les va a pedir un código de conversación. Ustedes citan el código en esa ventana y luego se les va a abrir la traducción. ¿Ok? ¿Cómo va a funcionar eso? Aquí les voy a compartir brevemente. Ustedes ingresan en el link de Microsoft, le dan el código de la conversación y el programa les va a empezar a traducir algo así. Les voy a mostrar. Ustedes van a ver en su pantalla, la doctora Melissa va a ir hablando en inglés y ustedes van a ver en su pantalla en español lo que ella va diciendo. ¿Cómo hacemos con Zoom? Si quieren ver la cara de la doctora Melissa y sus slides, entran a Zoom nuevamente, lo minimizan y entonces va a quedar la ventana de Zoom minimizada sobre esta pantalla de traducción. ¿Ok?
Para
Mientras
clarificar, perdona,
Sí,
Betsy,
Santi.
para clarificar en este momento, como estamos hablando en español, el traductor está un poco loco. Una vez Melissa empieza a hablar en inglés, se va a traducir a la perfección y va a ser únicamente Melissa la que va a ser traducida. En este momento nuestra voz está entrando por el computador de ella y por eso está saliendo estas palabras, pero una vez empiece la presentación ya se arreglará el problema. Bueno.
Gracias, Santiago. Muy bien, Santiago Barragán es nuestro director de educación en ICF Colombia. Quienes habla su servidora, Betsy Anciani. Soy la presidente para la International Coaching Federation en Colombia. Para aquellos que no saben o no han escuchado hablar antes sobre la International Coaching Federation, somos la organización de coaching profesional con mayor presencia a nivel mundial, en más de 150 países y con más de 50,000 miembros. Quienes pueden formar parte de International Coaching Federation, coaches certificados que ya terminaron su entrenamiento, que cuentan al menos con 60 horas de entrenamiento en lo que es la definición de coaching de ICF, el código de ética y las competencias básicas de coaching. Al final de cada una de nuestras conferencias durante esta semana, por favor, no se pierdan nuestra programación. Estamos en Facebook, en Instagram, en LinkedIn. Estamos en YouTube también como ICF Colombia, y en todas nuestras redes sociales ustedes pueden consultar la programa y el link de inscripción para que no se pierdan ninguna de las conferencias. Al final de cada conferencia yo les voy a compartir un código de descuento para afiliarse a ICF. Si eras miembro de ICF o eres miembro actual y aún no renuevas tu membresía, tienes chance para renovar la membresía todavía. Tenemos un código de descuento que vamos a compartir al final de cada conferencia. Y además, todas y cada una de estas conferencias nos dan créditos de educación continua, porque resulta que como coaches profesionales, cuando obtenemos nuestra credencial, esa credencial se vence cada 3 años, y para renovarla nos piden que demostremos que hemos estado educándonos continuamente y nos van a pedir 40 créditos de educación continua. Cada una de estas conferencias nos otorga un crédito y medio en desarrollo de recursos, y cuando la conferencia se trata de las competencias, entonces que esta semana tenemos una conferencia relacionada con la competencia número 3, nos otorga un crédito y medio. En total, 13 créditos y medio de educación continua si asistes a todas las conferencias. Luego en el chat yo les comparto el correo electrónico donde pueden solicitar esos créditos de educación continua cuando termine la semana de programación. Esta conferencia tiene una duración aproximada de 60 minutos y al final de la conferencia vamos a tener un espacio de preguntas y respuestas. Por favor, necesitamos que todos tengan los micrófonos apagados para que solo se escuche la voz de la doctora Fristrom y así Microsoft Translator nos ayude a traducir. Si en el transcurso de la conferencia tienes preguntas, déjala en el chat que al final, entre Santiago y yo, vamos a leer todas esas preguntas. Bien, quiero hablarles ahora de la doctora Melissa Fristrom. Voy a permitirme leer acá su perfil profesional. La doctora Melissa Fristrom es conocida por aprovechar el poder de lo invisible para ayudar a individuos y equipos a descubrir los factores ocultos que ayudan y dificultan su éxito. Durante casi 2 décadas ha ayudado a líderes de más de 83 países en 6 continentes a descubrir los patrones inconscientes que bloquean el crecimiento y el cambio en sí mismos y en sus organizaciones. Cuando las soluciones son fáciles, sus clientes no la necesitan, pero cuando no pueden encontrar una solución por su cuenta, ella los ayuda a descubrir los factores ocultos que los detienen. Una ejecutiva senior convertida en coach profesional. La doctora Melissa tiene una experiencia organizacional significativa que incluye haber convertido también en CEO. Ella combina eso con un profundo estudio psicológico que examina las formas inconscientes en que los líderes evitan tener éxito. En el 2001 fue invitada a ser miembro inaugural del cuerpo técnico de Harvard Business School y ha trabajado con más de 2,000 estudiantes, exalumnos y ejecutivos de Harvard Business School. Conocida como The Fixer, es llamada cuando hay una necesidad de sensibilidad y matices. Antes de convertirse en coach, la doctora Fristrom tuvo experiencias comerciales de primera línea en una amplia gama de situaciones, desde compañías Fortune 100 y organizaciones sin fines de lucro hasta compañías exitosas y empresas con problemas de liquidez. Ha trabajado en General Mills, Hasbro, IBM, Anthor Think y Polaroid, y ha gestionado marcas como Cheerios, Polaroid, iSun, Camera, Tonka, Play School y Cool Tools. Melissa tiene una licenciatura en Asuntos Exteriores de la Universidad de Virginia, un MBA de la Escuela de Negocios de Harvard y un doctorado en Psicoanálisis de la Escuela de Graduados de Psicoanálisis de Boston, donde su disertación, Límites autogenerados para el éxito, un caso para seguir adelante, le permitió identificar los factores a menudo inconscientes que limitan el éxito de los clientes. La doctora ofrece programas y talleres personalizados para audiencias globales. A diferencia de otros programas que generalmente involucran a un orador y una audiencia, sus programas incluyen un alto nivel de interactividad. Melissa, welcome to Colombia once again. We are honored to have you here in Bogota. We are very excited. And as you can see, we have people from all over the country, but also from Latin America. Thank you so much. And the screen audience is yours. You are mute.
I'm afraid I always forget that. So I am going to tell you today about the process that I use with clients to make lasting change and ultimately then achieving success with them. So what I know about learning as adults is that the best way for us to learn is to do it. So I am going to encourage you to go through the process today with me with your own idea, and it'll be clear what it is. And I know it's easier and it's early in the morning and you could, I'm just not going to bother, but I really encourage you to do it, to actually write it down. You are much more likely to remember it and be able to use these practices with your clients. And I hope you find them useful. And if you don't, let me know what would be more useful. I'm more than happy to do that too. Any questions before I go on? Nope. Okay. So what I want to talk about is to introduce you to the idea of the conscious and the unconscious. So we think that our conscious mind is what informs our actions, what we think we do. But neurologists broadly agree that 90% of our actions are influenced by our unconscious. That's a lot to not know what's going on and not be paying attention. So I'm going to talk to you today about how you can pay more attention to that unconscious. So what do I mean when I say unconscious? Well, let's take an example of a scientist who talks about his childhood as being the precursor to him being a scientist. So one morning, he was about 2 or 3, he goes to the fridge and tries to take the milk jar out of the fridge and pour him some milk, and he grabs it and it breaks all over the floor, and there's milk and glass and it is a mess. And his mom comes in, looks at the mess, looks at him, puts him up on a stool so he'll be safe, cleans it all up, and then talks to him about, now, were you trying to pour yourself a glass of milk? And he said, yes. She said, is that something you would like to learn? And he said, yes. He said, okay. She said, we're going to do that. So she took him into the backyard and brought out something that was heavy, and then something that was light that was like a milk jug, and eventually a milk jug partially filled. And they did experiments to help him learn how to do that. So what did he log into his brain? He logged into his brain, oh, if I fail at something, I can practice it and get better. I can have experiments to learn. We as humans take these things we learn and we put them in our brain. And we often attach unconscious stories and narrative because of the humanness. So we like to make all of the questions have meaning. And so that is the meaning that he placed with that. And he claims that is a large part of why he became a scientist. So for us, each of us has this unconscious blueprint inside of our unique lived experience. And there are times when that lived experience may have worked then, but doesn't work now. So our job is to unravel that to make better choices in the minute. Because he didn't know in that moment, and he still doesn't always, he had to think back to, why did I come to science? Why do I really like experiments? Why do I not worry when something breaks? Because that's not what all of us did. And there are lots of them that we categorize in and we don't pay as much attention. You wake up in your bed and you know you're not going to fall through your bed. You can put your feet on the floor and you're not going to fall through. So these are things that we've put in our heads so that we know what's going to happen. And oftentimes, if it's a slightly bigger event or there repetition of them, we add meaning to it. And when we have not explored that meaning, it will sabotage us. Sometimes it's there to still serve us, like it did him as a scientist. But a lot of times it worked then, but it doesn't work now. So imagine that same experience of someone that age, a boy making the glass, and a parent comes in and goes, oh my gosh, this is a mess. This is terrible. Get up here. Oh, we can't ever do this. We cannot do this. And the kid then goes, oh, I can't fail. Failing is bad. Completely different story. It's not a right or wrong. It's just understanding what those stories are that we put in there. Another person may have done it and parent came in going, oh my gosh, this is a huge problem. And the kid goes, ooh, when I make a mess, I get attention. And so later on in life, they may keep repeating that. So self-sabotage is generally fueled by self-generated limits that block us and we're not aware of them. Oops. So just to be very clear on this, we often see that change fails. It does not fail because we're not motivated. It doesn't fail because we don't work hard enough. And it doesn't fail because we don't know enough about the research and the science. In my experience, it most often fails because there are factors we do not acknowledge and deal with sabotage from us. So I'd like you to have a shift if you can. And if you can start with yourself, that is great. There is nothing wrong with me. I mean, that's the shift. The first one is, there is something wrong with me and I have to fix it, versus unconscious significant influences influence how I do things. And I have the power to shine light on those hidden assumptions in the moment and act out of my best interest. So you are not broken. You are fine as you are. In fact, if you can accept that premise, you're in the best place. Many of us aren't quite there yet. But that idea that there is something wrong and we have to fix it actually limits our ability to fix it. If we can look at it as, okay, I am the way I am and I have an ability to change it, is different than there's something broken with me. So what is this process? Well, when we identify these blocks, we engage with them in the moment and we increase the options available to us. So that means when something comes up, and we're ready to act. You know, oh my gosh, I'm so upset, and I jump to action. Now what we're going to do is we have this experience and we go, oh, wait a minute, this is like an experience from my past. I need to take a minute or a second and think about how do I want to react in this moment that will get me what I want longer term? And then we act that way. This is not about changing your feelings. It's about understanding them. It's also about understanding them so we don't have to act on them. I sometimes ask if there are any questions now, but I'm going to have you keep doing the questions on so that we can talk about them later. So if it is harnessed, that unconscious part, we are going to move towards success. This works actually for individuals and organizations, because organizations, they're a collection of individuals, and organizations gain their own particular unconscious actions that can be changed. So the bottom line is, you can't change the past. We can't change the future. We can only make change in this moment. So we're going to talk a lot about how do you be in the moment and be present. It's a lot of what is talked about these days. One of the fastest ways to do that is with our breath. So I'm going to ask everyone to take a second, allow your eyes to either just shut slightly or shut all the way, whatever is most comfortable for you. And allow your awareness to come to your breath. You're not changing it right now. We're just letting it come to it. Notice where it comes in on your body. Do you feel it in your body? Breath is an autonomic nervous system. It means that if I choose to pay attention to my breath, I have control. And if I choose or forget to pay attention, my system will come in. So you can open your eyes again and know that even in this conversation, every time you start to think about, oh, I still have this to do today. Oh, I forgot to pick that up. Oh, I need to talk to that person. Allow yourself to say, oh, for just this time, I'm going to come back. Where's my breath? There it is. Okay, I'm going to stay in this moment. And we will drift off. That's just how we are. And the breath is a way to come back into the present. And the present is where you have the most ability to make change. So what I'd like you to do, this is the part, there are going to be a few where you're going to actually join me, is that I would like you to identify an area that you would want to focus on. It might be something you want to make a change around, or one thing that concerns you. Could be a pain point in your life, something that you want to spend some time this morning looking at. And if you want to write in an intention about what you would like to focus on, that's fine. But really, I'm just saying identify it. Identify something that is worth putting a little more focus on for you. Either it's causing you pain or sabotaging you, or you don't really know, but you'd like to know more about it. And I know it's a pain, especially on our computers, but either type it in, we're not going to do more than a one sheet, or jot it down. And again, I really encourage you to go ahead and do it. The research shows that if you write things or type them, you remember them differently, especially if you're in a class with someone or a workshop. Just typing what the person says does not go through the same channels as writing, because you have to sift it through to think, what do I write? So I'll shut up and give you about 30 seconds to think of something. Doesn't have to be perfect, because it's probably going to change anyway. All right. So this is the pathway that we're going to follow. Oops. So around the outside, you see that there is this circle of intention. That's what we just did. It's an intention, a goal, an objective, something that you'd like to work towards. And then we enter into this dynamic pattern where there's awareness, insights, and experiments. I'm going to take a couple of my clients through this process with you so that you can see it that way as well as for yourself. So I'm trying for multiple modalities, recognizing people do learn differently. So let's think about it, the intention part. We get an intention, and then we enter the working pathway, we bring awareness to it, we identify insight, we create some experiments. If this feels abstract, I promise it's not going to stay abstract. When we look at these, we first look at these pain points, set the intention, a goal, a destination. What would you like to achieve, to change, to learn? And I'm going to use the same one for all of the people I'm going to take you through, because I think it's good to see that a lot of people may have the same issue or intention. Every single one of them has different data and different information as to what motivates them to be the way that they are. And it is that motivation that we're kind of looking at. So first person, I have a subject matter expert in data who wants to move from this leader, wants to move from being, kind of the best data analyst person to a leadership of other data analysts. And this company had both. You could it's a scientific type role where you become an individual contributor and you just do that, and a leadership role. And she wanted to move to the leadership track. But she was afraid that she didn't know enough, and that they didn't have enough information to make decisions, and that really good leaders could make decisions with less information. So her intention was around data and her feeling that she wasn't good enough. And we looked at the intention, and we looked at two different options this could be. This is what she came up with. One, if it really is a data problem and she needs to get more data, okay, that's one thing. That's a data check. She can go get more data. But as we talked, we realized it was really what I would call a risk check. She needed to build the muscle to make appropriate decisions without all the data. And that was really tough for her because she really liked having all the information. But if you think about it, the higher up you go in an organization, the less information you're going to have because it's the people below you that are doing it. So while she wanted to be a leader, she was scared. All right, that's the first one. She's going to be the subject matter in data, and she's going to do a risk check. Second one, same thing. I'm not good enough. I have imposter syndrome. I don't deserve this position. And she had been promoted into a stretch position. So it was a little beyond what she could do. And she was afraid that people were going to find out that she didn't know enough and she didn't have enough skills. So here we have a skills check, and we have two different types of intentions. One was the reality check. Did she really not have enough skills to do this? And if that was the case, she should go get more skills. And the other one is a confidence check. That she had the skills, but thought she didn't because her self-confidence would go down. And in this case, it wasn't a reality check. She had the skills, that her bosses knew what they were doing, but she had a lot of trouble with self-confidence. All of these people would have said it was self-confidence. Hers, it was directly tied to it. Finally, my third example is there was a person that was brought in. There was an entrepreneurial organization moving to scale. And if you know entrepreneurial organizations, you do a little bit of everything, and you don't always have systems. And if the systems are there, they're not necessarily set up to scale. So they brought in someone who was a process person, and he came in and he was like, everything I do is different than they do. They hate me. I don't belong. Now, there were two questions around this identity and belonging for him. One was a tolerance check, which was, what is it about being different that bothers you? Are there parts of you you have to hide to feel safe in this organization? And are the general group dynamics that they don't want you there? So it's a very relational question. If that were the case, we would have had a very different discussion. What was the case is he didn't fit in, and it was much more of a tolerance check. He didn't feel like he fit in, but he actually did fit in. And it was just that he was doing things differently. And so he needed to figure out what that meant. What was it like to be different? So those are my 3 examples, and that's where they started with the intention. So let's talk more deeply about intentions and where you go with them. And what's the unconscious part of an intention? So here you can see that they are, sometimes our unconscious, it leaves us with these competing priorities and unknown assumptions. So these are the things that are hidden that we kind of need to get out so that we can get to the next step. So for the risk check, what we did is we had her, what do you think is that unconscious piece that's involved here? And when she thought about it, she realized that it was people make wrong, terrible decisions without all the data. And because that is what she believed, she was never going to be able to build the muscle to make appropriate decisions without all the data until she acknowledged that. And she figured it out. And then we had to look at how true is that statement? Because that was what was stopping her, because she didn't want to make terrible, wrong decisions. And if you have to have all the data, then she could not move into that leadership part without working those 2 together. Second person. This is the one that got promoted into a position a bit above. And she wanted to understand the triggers that led her to doubt herself. And she realized, though, that in doing that, she really believed the fear of not being good enough keeps me sharp. It keeps me ahead. So if she is using this limiting factor as a motivator, she has to find a different motivation tactic. She can't keep using, oh, I'm not good enough, I better go get more information, or she's going to keep her confidence down. And the third one, which was the gentleman brought in to scale a company, he did things differently. And his unconscious blocks was all leaders are the same. And the last place I wasn't okay with, I did things and they hated me, and this place is going to hate me too. So there he shifted to a process. It was really a process check, and to see, was that true? Were they going to hate what he did? Did they already hate what he did? Or was that him bringing the last job in with him? So what happens when we get these? Sometimes just acknowledging the competing hidden agenda is sufficient to release us to change. Oftentimes we need an activity to actively work on it with an activity or research them to understand them better. And sometimes the goal or intention itself changes after you uncover that part. All right, we're going to move to another, just a second, sorry, my screen is, there we go. Another breath. So this time, I'd like you to bring your eyes closed. And I'd like you to double the length of your exhale. So if you inhale for 2, you exhale for 4. And the reason for this is that breath is connected to the vagal nervous system, and that's our fight, flight, freeze system. And that when we breathe in, we bring out all this oxygenated blood and it gets us revving and going. And when we exhale, we move everything out, and that calms down that process of fight, flight, or freeze. So you want to have double that amount. So I'm going to count it for you. I'm going to count it for 5 breaths and do what you can. If I'm counting too long, skip it and make yours shorter. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And let your breath go back to normal and come back in the room. Now I'd like you to take a look at your intention. And I'd like you to, well, actually, I'm going to be a little provocative with your intention, if that's okay. Why haven't you made this change yet? What is the benefit of not changing? We're trying to find what's unconscious in us. What will cause you to fail? What assumptions have kept you from doing this? What gets in the way of your goal? Is there anything you can do about it? Sometimes it's helpful to name the behavior, the assumptions that are blocking us. Try to put one competing agenda or limiting behavior assumption that is affecting this for you. And I recommend you pick one that feels strong. And don't worry, these change over time, but we're going to hold that one for now. We're going to come back to the pathway, and we're going to enter the pathway now, and we're going to look at awareness. You can enter this pathway at any point, but I'm going to take you through them in this particular format. So how do you bring awareness? Well, one of the ways you do is that you notice things. You bring your curiosity without your judgment. It can be scary sometimes to notice your emotions, to feel them, to recognize them. Same with your thoughts and your body. So bring attentions to things that are already there. So if you're bringing awareness to your head, you're looking for either that monkey mind that keeps telling you things, slips of the tongue, song lyrics, many different ways to get at the unconscious blocks that could be in your head. In your heart, you might have emotions that you want to bring awareness to. It might be a fantasy or a dream or just a feeling. Hips, body. What's going on in your body? What happens in your body? What happens when you're too close to someone or not? Anything like that that has to do with this. That's internal feedback. You can also take in external, and you can watch how your family responds, or your people at work, or your community of coaches. And you can work together to help each other bring awareness and know what awareness you want to bring. So for the tolerance check of the person who wanted to be the leader in risk, decided to bring awareness to the decision path at home and at work. So what goes on in the mind and in the body when I have enough, when I actually have enough data versus when I don't have enough data. And just notice the differences in those two. Again, I'm in this phase, we don't take any of that and make it, say, oh, that's what it is. Here, we're just collecting the data. We want to have enough data to have insights. The second one that was a high potential person promoted wanted to understand the triggers that doubt themselves and help them lose confidence in their ability. So they brought awareness to when they lost confidence. What's happening right now? What am I feeling? And they decided to create a timeline so they could see when it happens versus when it doesn't. They actually thought it was going to be when they were around senior people, but that turned out not to be true. And they were able to find that because they collected enough information to see that. The final one, the moving to process, the one that was coming in to help the entrepreneurial company go to scale, wanted to look at what am I saying and how is it being received? The body is one of the most important things in understanding how communication is received, Because if you're open and present, you can often feel what the other person is feeling. Are they understanding? Are they not? Are they ignoring? Are they not? But you can find that. You can find it in all three parts, head, heart, and hips. But hips, especially in communication, I have found to be very useful. All right. So they've collected enough information. And now they're going to move into the insight. So insight. This is so that you have some of the root cause understanding, the place in yourself that knows what's true. And if you don't find it, you move to experiments and then back around. So you can move to any place and come in. I think I've said this about 10 million times, but it's because it's so important. It's that you really need to collect enough data before you make assumptions. Otherwise, you're going to make the same unconscious mistakes again. So what kind of ways can you look at the data? You can look at it as themes. It's repetitive data that comes together, which is part of what the middle one I've been talking about, the self-confidence in the meeting. What she found had to do with themes. Dynamic tensions, those are two things that exist that you can't change. So two very different things that are there that you have to work with. Sometimes you're looking for unconscious patterns, reenactments that keep occurring. Really try to do this without judgment. Kind of like Sherlock Holmes in the magnifying glass. Huh, that's interesting. Huh, I didn't know I did that. All right, so for the first person, what did she find out? She realized that at home, she made more decisions without all the data because she couldn't collect all the data. But at work, she felt as though she had to have all the data because it could be available, and that's what kept her stuck. So she realized she could learn from how she made decisions at home, and that others had the capacity to make all the decisions without all the data, and that she could turn to some of her colleagues and pick a mentor or two above her that could teach her how to deal with that fear that comes with doing it when you don't feel ready. Middle one, skills check. Realize that their self-confidence went up and down based on how they were feeling, not the external circumstance, which is not what they thought. So then they focused more on their inner critic than external factors. Now, another person might have had the exact opposite reaction. In fact, I've worked with people with the exact opposite reaction. And this is why I find that it's so important to really be with the person and that each person is individual. And finally, the gentleman with the process check, he realized that things were not being heard in the way that it was intended. And he was asking for change before people had an understanding of the why. Also, there was no give and take. He never acknowledged he could learn something from them, as well as them learning from him. So he needed to make it less all or nothing and allow people to engage at their point, but also to recognize when they had an idea that was better than what his was, to allow that difference of idea and really point out, oh, that idea is something different. I hadn't thought of that, to be what informed the way in which he would ask them to try something new. All right, that's intention. Final one is experimenting. And so experimenting, the goal here is to either have, I'm sorry, is there something you need?
Just wondered what this was.
Oh, I'm giving a presentation in Colombia on unconscious, the unconscious. Thank you.
The world is interesting, and I didn't know if you did this on the side.
Thank you. Sorry. All right, next path is taking action. It's not a solution, it's not everything, but it is how you can take steps towards this. So experiments come in two forms, really, just two. which is either a mindset shift, I changed the way I think, or a change in behavioral action. What makes a good experiment? Timing is about 2 weeks. It's small enough to be doable, and the frequency for repetitive to gain data. So I'll go through the 3. First, the risk check. I wanted to build the muscle to make appropriate decisions without all the data. So make decisions before. So what she set up was she's going to both make a decision before all the data, go get the data, and then see if her decision changed when she had more data. She decided she would talk to 4 people that she deemed good at making decisions without all the data. And finally, she was going to practice riskier decisions outside of work because it was just too much for her to do at work right now. So that's how the first one did her experiments. Second one, wanted to understand the thoughts and doubts and that caused her to lose confidence in her abilities. So she identified the skills that made her unique, so her superpowers, to provide a foundation of this is what I offer to better tolerate the ups and downs of her self-confidence. So that when it would start to go way down, she'd be like, wait a minute, they hired me because of these superpowers. And I'm not feeling them right now, but I know that they're there. So I'm going to act as though they're there because that will help me as I'm learning what I need to learn. And finally, the process person in the process check, he decided to be more vocal about trying things their way first before trying to make a change versus assuming that his way was the best. And when presenting a change, to speak about the benefits to that person, that direct person and their goals, and how it would help the company get to scale. So probably not surprising, I'm going to now ask you all to do an experiment. But first, we're going to come back to the breath. I'm going to give you one more type of breath. This is a breath used by, there's a group called the SEALs in the United States. They're part of the Navy. They do a lot of underwater work, and they use this breath. They call it the box breath. You probably, if you take yoga or anything like that, you'll have heard of it. And they use it for balance. Believe it or not, snipers use it a lot too. I give you those very high risk places for you to see that if it can help them in a high risk place, maybe it can help me in a slightly less risky place. So what we're going to do, bring our eyes to a close or half mast. And we're going to just do a box where we're going to inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And I'll count it. So it is inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 3, 4. Hold, 3, 4. Exhale, 3, 4. Hold, 3, 4. Do the last one at your own pace. Then come back in the room when you're ready. Now, I admit this is one of my hardest. I almost always mess it up, and I was so sure I was going to get it right today, but I didn't. All right, so exercise. I'd like you to write down 1 or 2 experiments that you could try over the next 2 weeks around your intention point. It's a small action, ideally, or a mindset change, ideally that you will do multiple times. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and none of this is perfect. The beauty of this is that because we're always moving around the circle, we're making changes. Sometimes we put an experiment, and by the first day, you're like, oh my God, that was terrible. It's fine. Sometimes you go back out and change the intention. And so that's the pathway of to come to making changes that include some of the unconscious that stop us. You can start with an intention. You can enter the pathway at any point that you want. You can come back out to the intention if you find out it's not the right intention, and then come back in wherever you want. And again, it works just as well with organizations as it does with teams. So what am I going to leave you with? Well, you are exquisite just as you are, and optionality is available in the present. Understanding is so important, and while some believe understanding will change in time, I'm slightly more intentional about the change. I have found that taking small, specific actions toward change helps with success. One of the keys I find is looking for what's not there. Hence the question, what's the benefit of not making change? The journey is not easy, trust me, and it can be painful and frightening, but it is always liberating. And with that, taking actions with your breath, stay in the present, bring awareness, try small experiments. Now we'll do questions. We'll do questions from you versus the person riding by. I'm actually on vacation at my husband's mother's, and we are in a facility. We thought this would be a good place, so I apologize. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Melissa. Bueno, para todos, mi nombre es Santiago Barragán, soy director de educación continua, estoy con Betsy, nuestra presidente de ICF Colombia. Espero les haya gustado la presentación tanto como me gustó a mí. Los ejercicios fueron espectaculares. Y bueno, vamos a entrar a la sección de preguntas y respuestas. Para todos los participantes nos pueden poner en el chat sus preguntas y Betsy y yo vamos a ir moderando las preguntas. Just to begin, Dr. Fristrom, what a pleasure to have you here. I've had the opportunity to meet you in person, and I'm so glad to connect again and to bring you to Colombia virtually at least. Would you mind sharing with us what was the underlying motivation of becoming a coach?
I'm sorry, Santi, can you say that again?
Yes, what was the underlying motivation for you to want to become a coach?
So after business school, I worked in the for-profit and not-for-profit industry, and I worked my way up to being a CEO by the age of 30. And I realized that I preferred helping people grow than anything else. And that is just not what you want your CEO to love the most. It's not. So I turned the company around, gave it back, and I started coaching. And this was over 20 years ago when it's still a little bit of the Wild West. It was hugely the Wild West then. And that's how I started, because that's what I loved to do. I spent the first decade of coaching doing a bit more what I would call transitional, which is helping people figure out their superpowers or their brand and how to use that to find the right job, either within their organization or in another one. And then the next 10 to 15 years, I've spent doing much more leadership development with executives and such all over the world.
Right, let's go with the next question. So, Melissa, how do you suggest we find the courage to experiment in something completely new?
That's a really good question. I think there are a couple pieces there. Oftentimes, the current status has to become worse than the potential new place. So if you can't find the reason, a really good reason to change, most people don't change. And so the courage comes in being willing to look at what your deep set beliefs are. And they're sometimes your beliefs, there's sometimes your family's beliefs, there's sometimes people who are very, very close to you's beliefs. And that can take a lot of courage to say, I helped run an organization many, many years ago, first job out of business school. And we did anti-racism in the United States, and we would put together boxes of things. So we would, with teachers of young children, and we would have a dinner with a whole bunch of people. We did one we had a Colombia box, we had an Argentinian box, we had an Ethiopian box. And what would happen is these teachers could take them boxes into their kids' classrooms and learn about these other cultures, but they had to go through the anti-racist training first. And one of the most stunning things to me was the story of, we taught them that kids need to know everyone makes mistakes. Their parents make mistakes, their grandparents make mistakes, they make mistakes, such that kindergartner came in, and the teacher told us this after taking the training and borrowing boxes, that he came in and he said, you know, yesterday my dad said I shouldn't play with, I think let's say Billy, I don't know what the boy's real name was, because of his skin color, but I think grandpa just made a mistake. And so if we can think about it in terms of, we don't have to write off that other person's beliefs. We can just say, they might've made a mistake, or they did the best they could in their time. So that's one small piece of the courage. The bigger one, as I said, is being willing to examine these pieces and taking the time for it. And then I think I'd say the final biggest is to be kind with yourself as you do this. And we all have inner critics, and they all tell us we're terrible. And I mean, you know, mine is even going during this presentation, but I can tolerate it and move with it and say, oh, I know where that's coming from. So if we can do this work without judging ourselves, that's the piece I think takes the most courage.
Tenemos la mano levantada de Luisa. Adelante, Luisa.
Gracias, Santiago, Betsy. Yo voy a hacer la pregunta en español y si está bien para ustedes, me gustaría hacérsela a Melissa en inglés después. Y lo que le quiero preguntar es, en el momento en el que ella cambió, hizo su cambio a la carrera de coaching, si hubiera tenido disponible el framework que nos compartió hoy, ¿qué experimentos hubiera diseñado? Se va a hacer la pregunta que le va a hacer. Melissa, good morning. I was just asking for permission to ask the question in Spanish and then ask directly to you what I wanted to know. And my question is around, a lot of people do, you know, big changes from corporate world to coaching. And I was curious to know if you had this framework available at the point where you decided to move from being a CEO to become a coach. Which experiments would you design, or how would you, walk through that?
So I did not have this framework because I created this framework, so it didn't exist until later. The other piece is I wouldn't have known that this is what I was meant to talk about until I had my degree in psychoanalysis. So if I were working with, so I think what I heard your question to be, and if I get it wrong, please correct me, is what advice and how would I use this with a CEO if I were with them and they wanted to change to coaching? And the first step is the hardest one, honestly, for me, and I think for that person would be to know, I'm ready to give up being a CEO to do something that's not societally is accepted, that is potentially less of a, it's got less of a title. I'm giving up this cachet. Is that okay? And do I really know what it is and what I want it to be? So when I did it, I had made the point, I already knew that I loved helping people, and that was not what was going to happen here. It did not go overnight, though. I turned the company around, gave it back to them, and then it took a while to build a practice. So I had some other jobs and gigs in there too. So if I were working with someone, the unconscious were around, what does it mean to give this up? What does it mean to step aside and not do what the school trained you to do, which was you've reached this pinnacle at a young age, of course you should stay. And I say no. And what does it mean to take that kind of risk? Now, I happen to be someone who loves newness. So that part wasn't as hard for me, but it is hard for other coaches I've worked with. You also give up a lot of security. I was able to do some coaching at Harvard Business School, which gave me some of a runway that other people don't get. So I would have used it. I think I actually probably did use some form of it for myself, but it would definitely be in the making sure it's the right decision for you, and testing it out and trying to get, maybe shadow a coach a bit or try to get some understanding of what does it really look like to be a coach out on your own.
Thank you.
Les recuerdo a todos los que estén participando en esta charla, nos pueden dejar sus preguntas o en el chat y con Betsy vamos a estar moderando las preguntas. La siguiente pregunta es primero en español y después la traducimos en inglés. ¿Qué práctica nos recomienda la doctora para todos los coaches que puedan pagar esos dividendos en el largo plazo? Melissa, if you can choose a practice that all coaches should be doing that will pay off in the long run, what recommendation would you have?
Wow, Santi, only one. So my biggest one actually is one that isn't in here, but I'm going to explain it anyway. And you all will have to tell me if this fits with the way your language works. So it's something that I use in English and or change in English. And there are some languages that don't show up in this way. So I don't know, but I'm going to tell you this anyway, if that's okay. So in English, when we ask a question, there is an object of that question. Why did you do that in the meeting? That asking it with the you makes the other person's defenses come up and I don't get a real answer and they're not going to be there with me. If I say and make the meeting the object, what happened in the meeting? They come around the desk and we look at it together and we can be a little further away and they don't feel attacked. And finally, if I say, I am curious about the meeting, it's not even on the meeting anymore, it's on me, the focus, not in a narcissistic way, but in a way that allows people not to feel attacked, to not trigger their inner critic. So one of the biggest practices I find is to take, it's taken many years to do this, but taking the you out of asking questions so that I don't incite their inner critic that's going to stop everything. With that, I follow their lead. So I will ask them, I'm curious if I should ask you about X. And if they say, oh no, this is more important, that means they're not ready to talk about it yet. I don't push it because I really trust that they know what's best. It's my job to figure it out. If the coaching fails, it's my fault. I either took the wrong client, I didn't give the right exercises, I didn't match what they needed. It's my responsibility to do that. So now I have to ask, is that how the structure of your language is set up when you ask a question? Yeah, okay. I think what that does, that and following their contact are two of the things I learned from being an analyst. And they allow me to learn more about people than I otherwise would. And as a coach, what I'm trying to do is understand. And so that's probably what I would say. I'd also say that it does tie to the unconscious in those two because they know where we need to go, even if they don't know to say it. It's in their unconscious. And the not using the you allows that unconscious part that's protecting them not to come up. But I think the words I used might make it easier to understand.
Right. Thank you for your answer.
Sure.
We have a question from Diana Gonzalez. Is your methodology close to immunity to change of Robert Kagan? Or what is the difference?
I love Bob. His work is great. Immunity to change is a great primer on it. Now, the thing with immunity to change, and I do know it very well, and I have studied it and studied with him, is that he does one piece of it. I look at the unconscious bigger. So his unconscious is really centered mostly around the intention. And I happen to bring a bit more probably the analysis to it that also brings the unconscious into the awareness and the insight and the experiments. So I'm probably even more heavily there. But yeah, his stuff is great. And he's out of Harvard Ed School, and they do work. I've done work with them. I think it's the most accessible book and probably the closest to what I talk about. Like when people ask, that's the one I recommend. So yeah, if you like his stuff, you have good taste.
Thank you, Melissa. We have another question inside of private. Is there a specific book that you wish everyone that, is a specific book that was especially instructive in your development as a coach?
Not really. Like if I were to pick one, I would have said read Immunity to Change. That's closest to what I do. But I had already been coaching a while by the time I found that. But I have a doctorate in psychoanalysis, and this is the world of the unconscious. And I spent over a decade doing it. So for me, it was the practice. And when you do that, you do, I had a weekly individual and a weekly group meeting every week for over a decade. I had supervision for clients and patients. So there was a lot of what is my stuff, and then a lot of how to get to their stuff. And I think the biggest thing I see a problem with is when people haven't done their own stuff and it comes out with patients and clients. And so it's not so much that there is a book, but I would encourage us to really make sure we look at ourselves. The other piece that is really good is this idea of being in the present. So I would learn that when I would walk into the room with someone and all of a sudden I would have feelings that didn't have anything to do with me, I became very good at looking what part was what we call countertransference and transference. And that ability to make the difference and understand that difference really helped my understanding of the other person. And also I'm dyslexic. So I can read and write. I'm not a bad, it's not bad. It's actually quite good. I have different superpowers, but I am less likely to read a whole book. I'm more likely to read a synopsis of it, or to take a class, or to talk to a colleague about it. So there wasn't, but that's not too surprising because of who I am. Also versus my husband, who's a librarian now, and he reads everything. And he would rather read rules to games he's never going to play. I don't like reading the rules to a game, and he doesn't actually like me trying to teach games, so it works out great. So I think I would say I am so glad that you want to read some, do Immunity to Change. And if you're not a reader, then find other things, other ways to bring in the information that might be helpful.
Thank you. Quería recordarles a todos que nos pueden solicitar los CCEs, los créditos de educación continua, al correo de afiliaciones @ICF Colombia. Betsy lo acaba de poner en el chat. También los invitamos a que evalúen la experiencia de esta conversación, de nosotros como moderadores, en la forma que está en el chat. Vamos a empezar a cerrar esta sesión. Si tienen unas últimas preguntas, los invito a que se pongan. Melissa, for the moment, before we do a close-up, is there anywhere you want to point people to learn more about your work, more about you?
Oh, you are welcome to look at my website. It's Core Allies. If there's any question you have or anything you want to know, feel free to send it to me. I'm happy to support anyone in any way that I can. And I now hear, I am sorry, we expected this to be a good place to be, but it sounds like it is more noisy, and I apologize for the background noise. So with that, just feel free to send me an email at any time.
Aquí estoy copiando el email para compartírselos en el chat. El email para Melissa. Esperen un momento, se los dejo en el chat. Ok. Aquí está el email y vamos con el website. Ok. There you go. Allí en el chat acabo de depositarles el email de Melissa y la dirección de su página web. Ella nos está invitando a entrar en contacto con ella. Aquí nos preguntan si la sesión está siendo grabada. Sí, la vamos a publicar en unas próximas semanas. Estaremos publicando este material en nuestro canal de YouTube, ICF Colombia. Así nos pueden conseguir. Melissa, thank you so much for visiting us through Zoom in Colombia. It has been a pleasure to have you here today. We will keep in touch and we will send you the recording also to our YouTube channel, but we are waiting for you in some other times. You are more than welcome in Colombia. Thank you so much.
One of my best friends from business school was from Bogotá.
Oh, good to know, good to know. Muy bien, gracias. Bien, y como les acaba de decir Santiago, en el chat ustedes tienen un link para evaluar esta experiencia. En ICF Colombia nos complace crear experiencias para ustedes que sean únicas, irrepetibles y que sean de utilidad práctica, de valor para su desarrollo personal y profesional. Por favor, tómense el tiempo de contestar esa evaluación. También es información valiosa para Melissa. Y si tú eres miembro de ICF y aún no has renovado tu membresía, estás a tiempo. Por asistir a nuestra programación de la Semana Internacional del Coaching, puedes utilizar ese código que estás viendo en pantalla. Solamente está vigente desde hoy hasta el 17 de mayo. Y si te quieres afiliar por primera vez a la International Coaching Federation, ¿qué necesitas? Al menos, mínimo, 60 horas de entrenamiento en coaching, que incluya la definición de coaching de ICF, código de ética y las competencias básicas. Si eres un coach que acaba de finalizar su certificación o que todavía no te habías acercado a ICF, ese es el momento, te puedes afiliar con ese código. Nuestra membresía anual tiene un valor de $245 y con este código la membresía queda en $195. Es un buen momento para renovar nuestro compromiso con el gremio de coaching profesional más grande a nivel mundial. Si quieres optar por solicitar los créditos de educación continua de cada una de nuestras conferencias, puedes completar todas las conferencias y pedir todos los créditos, que son 13 créditos y medio, o puedes seleccionar las conferencias y decirnos, mira, quiero estos créditos de educación continua por estas conferencias, los solicitas a afiliaciones@icfcolombia.com. Muy bien, muchísimas gracias. No se pierdan, por favor, la programación. Por acá nos dicen, esta sesión queda grabada, sí, ya les contesté. Aquí tienen los datos de Melissa. Y excelente presentación, nos dice Sony. Muchas gracias. Gracias a todos ustedes. Magnífica presentación, dice ya Tracy. Magnífica explicación. Muy bien. Muchas gracias a todos. Por favor, consulten nuestra programación. La semana está bastante interesante. Ahora al mediodía tenemos la evolución del coaching en las escuelas de negocios. Y en todas nuestras redes sociales pueden seguirnos para toda nuestra programación de esta semana y la programación que siempre estamos teniendo para ustedes, para su desarrollo personal y profesional. Muchísimas gracias a todos por acompañarnos en esta primera sesión, en esta primera conferencia con broche de oro con Melissa. Muchísimas gracias.